Welcome to the Birth Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Hof, BSN RN. I am a wife, a mother of two, and a nurse specializing in the care of women and newborns. In this podcast, we will share powerful journeys of birth givers with the goals of lifting the veil on the birth experience, healing through sharing, and beginning an open conversation to strengthen trust and promote transparency between birthing people and healthcare providers. Hello! Today I have with me Sarah Engay-san. Sarah is the mother of a beautiful girl. She is an educator, a curly hair specialist, and has her own YouTube channel, Curl to Curl. Sarah, welcome and thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me, Kelly. This is awesome.
Yeah, I'm excited. I know your birth story is awesome, so I can't wait to hear.
Yeah, it's something I love to share and don't get that much of an opportunity to. I actually wrote it down for my daughter that, it will be exciting to have a verbal documentation of it.
Oh yeah, that's so awesome that you wrote it down for her.
So like Kelly mentioned, I am a mom of one. So I've actually only ever had one pregnancy. We started trying to have a baby after we had been married for about 4 years. Originally, we had planned to start trying for a baby 2 years after marriage, but my husband is French and we were moving back and forth from countries. We just had a lot more moves than we were anticipating at the beginning of our marriage. So childbearing just got kind of delayed. At the same time, we weren't really in a hurry. So I was 29 and my husband was 36 when we started trying. And it took us a little over a year to get pregnant. Since I wasn't in like that geriatric age, I had to be trying for a year before the doctor would come in and do anything to help or do any tests. So I was tested first and everything came out fine. And then my husband was tested and he had a varicose vein around his testicle, which is actually the number one cause of male infertility, but it's also very easy to fix. So the first step was to give him some male prenatal vitamins, and his urologist recommended them. I guess they're like, you don't have to have a prescription for him, but he recommended them. And we ordered those. And if the prenatal vitamins didn't work, he was going to have surgery. But we got pregnant within like 1 or 2 months after he started taking the vitamins. So that was awesome. My pregnancy was pretty smooth. I did have a few things happen. So at work, I was walking up the stairs one day when I was pretty far along and I passed out. And that was related to, I have vasovagal response. So I've passed out 2 other times in my life prior to getting pregnant. And so with vasovagal response, it's basically if your heart rate gets really high and then you stop suddenly, you can pass out. And so when you're pregnant, just walking upstairs can be a lot of exercise. And then I just walked up the stairs and then stopped suddenly. But luckily I didn't fall in any way that harmed my daughter or anything like that. So that was that. Another condition that they found during my blood test is that I carry the beta thalassemia minor trait. So I don't have any symptoms from it other than just mild anemia. But since I didn't know about that before, my husband had to be tested to make sure he didn't carry the trait too, because if he did, it could have been serious issues for my daughter. And luckily, he did not carry that trait. And so then the only other minor issue I had during my pregnancy was heartburn. I got a lot of heartburn, especially towards the end of my pregnancy, which I guess is normal. I asked the nurse practitioner if Tums were safe to take. And she told me that, yeah, I could take Tums, but it's really just calcium. So I could just drink milk. And I love milk. I've always loved milk my whole life, but I had been vegan for the 2 years leading up to my pregnancy. And so I drank so much cow's milk during my pregnancy. Towards the end of my pregnancy, I was drinking like 3 gallons a week by myself of milk. So I was drinking a lot of milk. I guess I was making up for lost time. So I don't plan to get pregnant again, but if I did, I would probably just take the Tums instead of all the milk I was drinking. So the practice I went with my pregnancy had both doctors and nurse practitioners and midwives. I didn't do like a lot of research about what practice I wanted to use. That's just the office that my gynecologist was located at for the couple years prior to that. So when I got pregnant, that's just who I went with. But I was very happy with them and my whole experience with them. When I was early on in my pregnancy, people would ask me what my birthing plan was. And I feel like for someone like me, I grew up in the Mormon church. Literally having babies was my destiny in life, right? But I felt like for having that be like my number one goal in life, I feel like I knew so little about it. And so when people would ask me what my birthing plan was, I was like, I don't know, like have the baby. That's my plan. Just listen to what the doctors say and have the baby. And so I didn't really know there was much to it. I was worried about pain. I obviously did know that it was painful to have a child, to birth a child, but I didn't know that there were like a lot of different options to prepare for it. Like I said, I just planned to do what the doctor told me. I did early on, without a doubt, plan to have an epidural. I had read the book, Bringing Up Bébé, because I lived in France with my French husband. And so I had read that like several years before I got pregnant, right after I moved back from France to the US. And so I planned to do motherhood like the French way. That was all I really knew about what I wanted to do. And one thing that was different about French women was that they didn't call birth without an epidural natural birth. They just called it birth without an epidural. They don't consider anything about it natural, and they just don't do it. Like French women get epidurals. So that's what I plan to do. I also have a very low pain tolerance. So my thought was, why wouldn't I just take the pain meds during what would likely be the most painful experience ever? We ended up taking a birthing course at the hospital where my daughter was born that was recommended by my practice. And I was really glad we took it because it covered everything I felt like I needed to know before I gave birth. It covered natural birth with an epidural, what to expect if you were induced, what if you needed to have a C-section. I felt just way more prepared than I did before. And then also a coworker of mine who had just had a baby offered me a copy of her book, Hypnobirthing. And I don't even think she had used it herself, but I did have a really close friend who had 3 kids already, and she did hypnobirthing. I don't know if she did it for all 3 kids, but she definitely did it for at least her last one and maybe her last 2. And she highly recommended it. And it was someone I trusted. I didn't really have money at the time to spend on like a hypnobirthing class, but I figured I could read the book. And it was just more out of curiosity that I read it because I thought it was going to be like a little too woo-woo for me. But I did read it and I actually found it really practical. I don't know if I had a hypnobirth, but the things that stood out to me about the book from what I remember, because my daughter's 7, so it has been a while. But what stood out to me in the book was the description of the pain you feel during childbirth isn't because something's going wrong. Like the pain you feel when you break your arm or stub your toe or things. Those are all pain. Your body's telling you something's wrong. But the pain you are experiencing during childbirth is usually because everything's going right. And the book explains everything that's happening, like your cervix expanding and how you become a face and all of that. And so like just knowing what was happening in the philosophy of hypnobirthing helps make it less painful because you can tolerate it if you know like what's happening. And I found that to be true. I also learned, I don't remember if it was from that book or the class that I took, I also learned that if I had an epidural, I wouldn't be able to be up out of bed, walking around during labor. And so I didn't want that. So my plan changed to like doing it without an epidural. I was always like, I know people's plans change, but that's what I'll go with. So back to my pregnancy, my due date was March 24th, which was during my spring break. Like Kelly mentioned, I'm an educator. So I was convinced that my daughter was going to come after spring break. I also wanted her to come after spring break so I could get her room ready during spring break. March 28th was Easter that year. My half birthday is March 27th. So I thought it would be cool for her to be born either of those days. I had no Braxton Hicks contractions. So I thought for sure I knew she was coming late. And in a weird way, I thought I could will her to come late. Like I thought I had some kind of control or say in it. And so she dropped a few days before she was born, which was causing me a lot of back pain. So I had my 38-week appointment the afternoon before she was born. So I went to my 38-week appointment. I talked to the nurse about some spotting and back pain. She asked me if we had had sex recently, and we had. And so she said that, that could cause the spotting. And she asked if I wanted to be examined. At my practice, they didn't do like regular examinations. And so I didn't want to, because either from the book or the class, I learned that like sometimes people are dilated to like a 4 for multiple days or multiple weeks. So I just didn't want to be living on the edge and like get my hopes up or feel like I was about to give birth and really not be about to give birth. So I didn't want to be examined. And for my lower back pain, she recommended a prenatal massage, which I never had time to schedule because by 7 p.m., so that appointment was at like 3 p.m, it was after work. And so by 7 p.m. that night, I started to actually think that I might be in pre-labor or labor. But I was having contractions that were getting worse. And like thought that night, especially early on the evening, I was like, this isn't that bad, but it also hurts enough that I hope it's not false labor, because if this is false labor, real labor is going to hurt a lot more. But, I was overall feeling pretty good. My husband and I used some of the soothing techniques we learned in class. I really liked being like on all fours, and my husband like massaging my lower back. That was something we learned in class that was really, really helpful for me. We called the midwife at the hospital a few times to share what I was experiencing and to try and decipher if it was real or false labor. And she told me to drink a lot of water and walk around a lot, because if it was labor, no amount of walking or water would make it go away. And so that was on March 16th. And I told my husband, I don't think we're having an Easter baby. I think we're going to have a St. Patrick's Day baby. And my husband got out our book from class and went to the chapter on false labor and tried to convince me that I was having false labor. He apparently was not ready, so he thought he knew better than me. I told him to get some sleep, because if we were having the baby soon, I would need him rested. So he goes to work super early in the morning. So he had, this was late in the evening, probably like 9 or 10 at night by that time. And he wakes up at 1 a.m. And so he went to bed. Well, he went to bed later, like around 1, he went to bed, because he had been up like 24 hours by the time I told him to go to bed. I had been up about 19, but there was still no way I could have slept through the contractions. So while he was sleeping, I took a bath, I rocked on my glider, I was catching up on my TV show. And this was the Thursday before spring break. So technically there was another day of work before spring break. So that my coworkers, I don't know, they could tell I was gonna have the baby the next day. I don't know. They're like, you're not coming in the next day. So I wanted to avoid going to the hospital too early, because I was told when you go early, you're more likely to have a lot of intervention. So it was about 5 o'clock in the morning by the time we left for the hospital. And my contractions seemed like they were whatever they recommend, 1 minute contractions, 1 minute apart for an hour, I think is what they recommend when you go to the hospital, if I have those numbers right. And so I had hit that. But then when I went to the hospital is like a 15-minute drive from us. And I only had 1 or 2 contractions. So I was real worried that we went in too early. But when I got in, I was 100% effaced and I was dilated to an 8. And in the hospital, my husband and I used the same soothing techniques we used at home. My water had not broken. So they offered to break it for me and told me things would escalate really fast. I said yes. And thanks to the class I took, I knew what that meant. To have your water broken. I had even held the tool that they use in the class. They passed around things like that. So you really had some knowledge before you were in the moment having to make decisions. It's like a tiny little thing and it has a little hook and it just breaks your water. So once they broke my water, it did escalate really fast. Like they said, it hurt like hell. I asked for an epidural and the midwife laughed and said it was too late for that. And my sweet daughter was born about 20 minutes later after they broke my water. So I mentioned the midwife. The midwife was with me during all of the delivery, except at the very end, because during the time I was pushing, I guess that's when they realized my daughter had had a bowel movement during delivery. And so she had swallowed her own poop. So the doctor came in the second she was born to pump her stomach. It was super fast. It felt like she was only away from me for 10 seconds, maybe. It was probably longer than that, but it felt super fast. and then she was back in my arms. I think giving birth was a magical spiritual experience for me. I had a really good, wonderful experience, which I did not anticipate because, like I said, I have a really low pain tolerance. My recovery was also pretty quick, but something nobody warned me about is that milk can come in real fast and heavy. And mine did. Mine came in like within hours. And my boobs were the size of half volleyballs. They were massive and they felt like bricks. It was very, very painful. My daughter wasn't latching very well at first. We did discover a few days later, like I think actually the day we got out of the hospital and just did like her doctor checkup, that's when we found out she was tongue-tied. So once that was snipped, all was well. But in the hospital, she wasn't latching very well. And I didn't have an electronic pump because my insurance said I had to wait until after the baby was born to order it for it to be covered. And for me, I didn't think that was going to be a problem because, you know, I had maternity leave and I didn't think I would need a pump until I went back to work, which wasn't going to be until 2 months later. The hospital was also fresh out of loaners of electronic pumps. And so they gave me manual ones. So I was literally pumping my boobs the way those manual pumps, it feels like you're spraying a water bottle is what it does, but it's the opposite. It's unspraying a water bottle, I guess. And like I said, my recovery was quick. 6 days after I gave birth, we walked miles to go see the cherry blossoms in DC with the crazy crowd. So that was my daughter's first outing and my first outing postpartum. I really did fall in love with motherhood from the start. I didn't experience any postpartum depression or anxiety. I just really was, I guess, lucky, you can say. I just didn't experience what a lot of people do experience after giving birth. So that is my birth story. And thanks so much for letting me share.
I love it. Okay, I'm curious. Do you remember the stuff that they have to help with labor? Personally, I loved the rocking chair, but you probably didn't have time to even sit in the rocking chair by the time you got there.
Yeah, I mean, we got there at 5 and she was born at 9. So we were there 4 hours before she was born. Just kind of came in, had my hypnobirthing music. I don't remember. I doubt that it was on my phone 7 years ago. I think it was a CD we were playing directly from a laptop or something like that. So we were listening to that. We kind of had our own little things. I did take a shower at the hospital. I had taken a bath at home. I took a shower. They don't have like water births, but I did take a shower and we just kind of did the things. I did rock on a rocking chair at home. We lived in a small little condo and I took the rocking chair out of what was going to be her nursery into our living room and just sat in front of all my shows.
Yeah, that's what I did. That's I was really, really grateful for that option the second time. So I didn't deliver my first there. I was on a stretcher with my first. It was awful. It was the worst pain ever. But I found that I could do a lot more. Just sitting in glider would work as well. Just the whole point of that is to help the baby's head descend in the pelvis without putting too much pressure on one spot. And that's helpful for you and baby because it helps the baby rotate and it helps you get through the labor. And I feel like I was able to get so much farther without as much pain. Now, when the baby did calm down and there was all that pressure after my water broke, that was crazy. But I really I love rocking chairs. So if anybody has a rocking chair, I know the ball is popular, but I just really want to advocate the rocking chair because the ball is so labor intensive.
Yeah, I was going to say that we didn't have a ball at home, but I feel like I did get on one in the hospital. But just like overall, I think what I ended up doing was I just had to be on all fours. And I think I maybe like leaned over the ball and my husband massaged my lower back. It was just, that was the sweet spot for me.
Right. Because it's hard to relax your whole body during the contractions if you're having to hold up your body, and especially your core if you're sitting on the ball. It works for some people, but it just wasn't, for me, it wasn't very good. So usually, here's what I ask most people. First of all, is if there's anything that you wish you could go back and tell yourself so that it would make the process easier. What do you think that there's anything you would go back and say?
I actually don't. Like, I really a good experience. I don't know that I would change anything. Obviously, if I was going to have another baby, I would know more, but I feel like I knew what I needed to know when the moment came. And then also anything could go extremely differently for a different pregnancy, a different delivery.
I agree that you're very prepared. And I think that your attitude towards it and being open and really not having preconceived notions, just following the directions that I wish that you could like tell all my patients. I mean, anybody listening to this, do it this way. Listen to your midwife when she says, go walk, do all those things, come in when the contractions are, you said 1 minute apart, but I know what you meant. There's like 1 minute in between contractions. So that's considered every 2 minutes for an hour, because it's the beginning of a contraction to the beginning of another contraction. So if your contraction is 1 minute long and you have a 1 minute rest period, then that's a really good regular contraction pattern. So if that's going on for an hour, yes, absolutely come in and then do all those things at home while you're in the comfort of your own home, like the bath. Oh, that feels so good.
Yeah.
And like I said, the rocking chair and all your favorite shows, have those lined up for sure. Be prepared to just distract yourself. So all those different things, all those distraction techniques were just perfect. I'm so glad I think that birthday class is really, really helpful that you went to. I've had a lot of moms that have loved that.
Yeah. I have a friend who goes to my same practice and they still offer that class. So her and her husband are going to go to, I was like, yes, do that. It's just funny because she lives kind of in the general area where I lived. I was like, you're like living my life. You're going to the same practice. Yes, do the things. I loaned her my hypnobirthing book.
Yeah, I kind of wish I'd known about the hypnobirthing because I know a lot of people that had some success with that. Like I did Bradley.
Yeah.
That's the one where it's like the husband led.
Yeah. Isn't Lamaze with the partner too? Lamaze?
Also, yeah, I think so. I didn't ever take that. There's a lot of like breathing with that. And I was like, I'm not going to be able to breathe. But I don't know about you, but I felt like breathing was the hardest part of labor. Did you have any difficulty with that?
It probably was, but I don't remember. I think, you block out the bad parts so that you want to do it again, right?
Right.
In 7 years, it was a magical birth experience. Like I felt close to heaven. Like
yes,
all good.
For sure. Yeah, that's the only way this species has survived. It doesn't sound like a spiritual experience most of the time.
I actually brought it up at dinner, and he's like, don't talk about it. I'm having dinner. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, I just think about all the blood. He had a very different view of the experience.
For sure. Yeah. My husband said he went to the bathroom after the baby was delivered. He walked back out and he was like, you were like flayed open. Like, I was like, really? Gross.
Yeah. Anytime the nurses came in to check on us when we were still in the hospital, he was like, can you check her? There was a lot of blood. And they were just like, there was actual minimal bleeding. I did have to get stitched a little. Mm-hmm. I was still just 2 stitches, I think it was.
Yeah, that's good. So did you push for very long? Do you remember?
Are you pregnant and planning a hospital birth? You don't need a birth plan. You need a birth vision. In my opinion, birth plans set you up for failure. Yep, I said it. Hear me out before you turn off this podcast. You may think that by downloading a generic birth plan, it means you're in control. The truth is, it's not that simple. No one can control exactly how their birth will go. There are way too many variables. What every pregnant person wants is to walk into the hospital pregnant and to walk out with a healthy newborn in their arms. The journey in between is the murky part. It's hard to know what issues might come up that need to be addressed. If you focus your energy on a birth vision rather than giving your power to a birth plan, you can empower yourself to make the best choices for you and your baby. That's why you need to get into my Empowered Hospital Birth program. As a labor nurse and mindset coach, I can help guide you through the process of maintaining the calm autonomy that will help you achieve the birth vision you desire. In my Empowered Hospital Birth program, I will help you identify the source of anxiety you have surrounding hospital birth, fill in knowledge gaps to make sure that you are fully informed and confident, learn key phrases so you can better communicate with your medical team, emotionally process your fears so that they don't hold power over you. Go to kellyhof.com/empowered to book a free 30-minute private birth vision call, where we will identify your top fears and must-haves and gain clarity on exactly how you want to feel in the birth space. That's kellyhof.com/empowered. I'm honored to be a part of your birth journey.
No, when I broke 20-minute push, And I mean, I feel like I wasn't even she was born 20 minutes later, and I don't feel like, I mean, I feel like I pushed very few times. It was like,
Yeah.
it was very
Well,
fast
because
for
when
me.
you come in 100% effaced and 8 centimeters, like the effacement, I feel like is one of the hardest parts. Because once you get that cervix nice and stretchy and thin, it's just like the baby's just going to come out. You know, you're not going to have to do a whole lot.
Yeah.
And then did they notice that she had meconium before she delivered, or was it afterwards and then they called?
It was before she delivered, because I am saying, you know, right when she came out. So I don't remember how close it was. I do think it was after they broke the water. So I do think it was like within that 20-minute window, if that's medically
absolutely.
possible.
Yeah. Sometimes if they break the water and it's clear, and then a little bit later or after delivery, they'll notice the meconium. And then if the baby inhales whatever's behind so there's the forebag, and then if the baby's blocking everything in, then sometimes all that's what they breathe in.
So what would have happened if I had her at home, like just with a midwife and her stomach wasn't pumped? Would she have gotten really sick? Could have been fatal like that?
It's hard to say. The recommendations change. At this point, we just evaluate. And if the baby has to have that deep suction, like where they go all the way down to the stomach, then they'll go ahead and do it. And it just is depending on how the baby reacts. And then if there's further respiratory symptoms, then they might do a chest x-ray. And if there's any further symptoms of lung problems or the possibility of any kind of infection, then they might do some treatment for that. But it's kind of just watch and wait, because it's hard to know if it goes directly into the lungs or if they swallow it or what happened. But they'll try to suction out anything if the baby is having some trouble breathing at the time of birth. Now, back when your daughter was born 7 years ago, they did recommend, I believe, if I remember correctly from what NRP was back then, I believe they went ahead and suctioned after a meconium delivery.
Yeah.
But now it's kind of
pump her stomach was the words they used.
They called it that? Yeah. Essentially that's what it is. They're just trying to get the stuff out of the stomach, because that's probably where it went. But if she took a deep breath, and then for a while they would say, don't stimulate the baby, because they didn't want anything in the mouth to go into the lungs. So the reason that you stimulate a baby after they're born is to get them to take that big deep breath. But then the fear was that if they took the big deep breath, then the meconium would go in there and cause problems.
I was screaming when she came out.
She came out screaming?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Yeah. So that was just the practice back then, that they would suction out the stomach.
Yeah.
Or like however deep the pediatrician decided that they needed to go. But yeah, like I said, it's changed a little bit. But you know better, you do better. And we can't do studies on babies. We have to just go based on evidence, and we would review charts and all that stuff. So it takes a long time for changes to come. So how much time did you have off after she was born?
I could have had a little bit more. I would have had more paid than I did, but I'm a school testing coordinator. And so my daughter came right after one testing window and, a month and a half before another testing window. So I went back to work after a month and a half. I would have had 2 weeks. And honestly, if I was still just teaching in the classroom, I probably would have taken that last month and a half off unpaid and just had her through the summer. But my main role in my school is giving standardized tests, which happen heavily at the end of the school year. So I came back for that, and my daughter went to daycare, in-home daycare, right next to the school I work out. And we call it, the name of my school, we call it that daycare, because all the teachers send their kids there. It's in-home daycare. She's amazing. And she actually ended up watching my daughter when she was much older, like 4, during the pandemic as well, and different things like that. So
those in-home daycares, man, they're pretty amazing. It sounds like she's got a corner on the market too, if she's right next to the school.
Yes. And she just takes teachers from our school because she likes getting them early and then getting off early in the afternoons.
Oh, nice. So were you able to still breastfeed? Did you go to the daycare?
No, I just pumped. I pumped.
Okay.
And the same way my milk came in strong, I could pump 2 bottles in like 10 seconds.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
I had a coworker. It was actually the coworker that gave me the book. We would pump together. We had a pumping room that we would pump together. Her baby was several months older than mine. And she would say to me, because she had limited supplies, and she looked at me one time and she said, "I know what it feels like to be a boy in the locker with a small wiener." She's like, "I feel so jealous of your milk."
That's funny. Yeah, I can definitely relate to that because being a nurse, we had our pumping room as well. And it was always like, we would always fluctuate. And some people would be having a lot of milk at one time and some people wouldn't. We're just like, why can't we just like combine it, you know?
Yeah, I definitely had extra. I definitely did donate some.
Yeah.
And I froze as much as I could. I was blessed. I was able to give breast milk to my daughter for several months after I was physically breastfeeding her, because at the time, breastfed her, I think, 14 months. So at the time, she was already on solid food, so she wasn't taking that much breast milk, but I still had a lot for her to take a bottle with for a very long time.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
When you went back, it was probably like, was it April or May?
It was, beginning of May. Yeah, beginning of May.
And then did you take the summer off?
Yeah, I have some.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
I didn't know if you had to do like coordinating during the summer.
No. I mean, sometimes I used to work over the summer just doing summer school testing, but I haven't done that since the pandemic.
Yeah. So kind of answered this, but when you're stressed out and you're trying to process new information, if you do anything unusual, I think it was your husband that did that though. He was trying to convince you that you were in labor.
Yeah. I feel like that was very sound mind. I was like,
right. Yeah. You were very mentally prepared.
Yeah. I talked to my brother like around 7, like right around that time I was thinking I was in labor, and I didn't say anything because I didn't want anything. And I didn't want my family there. My family all lives far away. My dad was coming first and then my mom. I didn't want my family there in the hospital. And it worked out that way because my dad got there March 20th, which was his 60th birthday. And so like right after I was getting out of the hospital. So that worked out. My dad's in Florida. My mom's in California. So then my husband's family is in Africa. So I've been married 13 years. I've never even met my in-laws. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So then did your parents come at the same time or did they like alternate, and did you have help for a while?
So my dad came first with his wife, and then my mom came later. And my mom's an educator too, so I think she came during her spring break, maybe. I don't remember how we decided or whatever, but that's just how it was. My dad was there for his 60th birthday.
That's awesome.
And then my mom came a few weeks later, so it was good.
That's great.
Yeah.
Did you feel like you had good support at that point?
Yeah, I did, because at church, called it March Madness, there was like 5 of us in my congregation that all had babies in March.
Oh, wow.
One of my, still to this day, best friends, she lives a little bit further away from me now, but she's still in the general area. But her due date was much earlier and mine was the 24th, so it was a little bit later. We didn't anticipate being in the hospital at the same time because she delivered at the same hospital as me.
Oh my gosh. And you guys were there at the same time?
We were there at the same time. Her daughter was born the day before my daughter.
Oh.
So they met in the hospital. She came, wheeled herself over and said hi to us. And she said, yeah, the nurses came to check on us. And I'm like, where are they? Like, they never have people leave the room where they didn't know. So yeah,
that's funny.
Our daughters literally met in the hospital and are still besties to this day. So that's a lot of fun. And yeah, so I felt like I had a lot of support, which was nice because I kind of feel for the moms who had babies during the pandemic in terms of not having that support, because where I was living, and I had my daughter 7 years ago, so that was several years before the pandemic, I had so much community. But since I've moved to a new area during the pandemic, I feel like I still have yet to find that same community that I had then, which is okay now because my daughter's older, but I feel like I would have been really lost without that community when my daughter was a newborn. So it was very helpful. I always said to that friend in particular, she had a son before. So I was like, it's so much easier to be like 2 on 3 than 1 on 1. Like, I was like, let's be sister wives, but like not sleep with each other's husbands.
Yeah, that's fair.
We should just all move in together and like have babies together and like take turns cooking.
For sure. Yeah, that village is super important. Well, if there's nothing else that you wanted to share, thank you so much, Sarah, for joining me. And don't forget to check out Sarah's YouTube channel, Curl to Curl. I'll put it in the show notes.
Thanks so much, Kelly, for having me. Have a great afternoon.
You too.
Do you have questions that you wish a labor nurse could answer? As your due date approaches, do you wish you could pick someone's brain about all the things that might happen during your labor? When you meet with your OB or midwife, do you forget your questions in the moment?
Do you feel like you need someone to take more time to walk you through what might happen in the hospital and how to truly mentally prepare? You're in luck because I'm offering this as a free service in 2023. To get details on how to schedule a free session with me, email me at birthjourneysrn@gmail.com. Thank you so much for tuning into my podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on future episodes. Don't forget to share the podcast with a friend who can benefit from the valuable insights that we share here. And if you could take a moment to leave a 5-star rating and review, it would mean the world to me. If you're ready to work one-on-one with me to embark on a transformational journey towards a confident and empowered hospital birth experience, go to kellyhof.com/empowered and enroll in my Empowered Hospital Birth Coaching Program. Together, we'll create a roadmap to a birth experience that you'll cherish forever. That's KELLYHOF.com/empowered. Let's make your birth experience extraordinary.